We'll do a review. We'll do a review of Likutei Sichas, Chelek Yutes, volume 19, the sicha for Parshas Voeschanan, sicha Aleph. The first sicha, Parshas Voeschanan, in Chelek Yutes. This sicha, the Rebbe discusses the unique specialty and uniqueness of the limud of Talmud Torah, even of study of Torah, even as with regards to Torah, to mitzvahs. And the Rebbe points out that we find by Torah special mitzvah of teaching children, that the mitzvah of study of Torah, of a parent to study Torah, is even at a young age before their bar mitzvah. And also that the entire observance of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is based on, some of it is based on the pasuk V'shinantam levanecha, which also talks about teaching your children, teaching the students. And the Rebbe brings out that the first halachas that discusses in the Rambam and in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is about teaching children. And the surprise is, why would that be the very first aspect of studying Torah? First seems like you have to study Torah, and then you have to teach it to your children. And you can't teach it to your children if you don't know Torah yourself. So why does the Torah start with the special mitzvah of teaching children? The Rebbe will bring out that especially by Torah, even more than by mitzvahs, we require self-subjugation, negation of bittul, of oneself, in order to have the basis before the approach of Torah, even more than by mitzvahs, as the Rebbe will explain, and that is represented by the idea of children, the way they learn the Torah in a sense of bittul. Let's look inside. Aleph. In der mitzvah von Talmud Torah, seinen do bechlolus zwei tzivuim. In the mitzvah of studying Torah, generally speaking, there are two commandments. Aleph, number one, is lilmoid, to study. Der chiyuv, kishiyakir, to learn in Torah, the obligation. When one recognizes, comes to the level of understanding, he has to study Torah. That's the one, is to study Torah for yourself. But the second thing is lelamdo. The second mitzvah is also to teach others. To learn the Torah mit andere, to teach Torah to others. Ubefrat, especially, oifun foter zu lernen mit seine Sinn. The father has a mitzvah to teach his sons. So gefindt man in them advar pella, so you find something surprising. So you have a mitzvah of learning, and you have a mitzvah of teaching. So the halachas begin with the mitzvah of teaching rather than the mitzvah of learning. Why is that? Gefindt man in them advar pella. So we find something surprising. Side the Rambam and side the Alter Rebbe, both the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, Heubenon Hilchos Talmud Torah, they start the laws of studying Torah, nicht mit din as mit is bechuyev zu lernen Torah, not with the law that one is obligated to study Torah, nor mit din, but they start with the law as is achiv mitzvah in Torah. There's an obligation, and it's a positive mitzvah from the Torah. Oifun av zu lernen Torah mit bnei hakot, that the father is obligated to teach Torah to his son, the minor son. Similarly, that's not understood. Why do we start with that? First, it should have stated the obligation of studying Torah in general. That means for the person himself. And then after saying that, it's not sufficient to study. Then you also have to teach it to others, to your young son. So first to learn it and then to teach it. As simply this matter is, why is there an obligation to teach it to your young son? It exists because there is an obligation to study Torah. Und das is atzivui noisav the mitzvah Talmud Torah legabe shar mitzvah Torah. So this is an additional command in the mitzvah of Talmud Torah more than other mitzvahs of the Torah, which means to also teach it to minors is in the Torah. Because by zeh is chinuch haktarim rabbanon. Other mitzvahs to educate the youngsters, that's only Under bar mitzvah, that's only midrabanan. And over here, it's an extra chiyuv that also for a cut. So that's an additional obligation. You study the Torah, do the mitzvah, and then additional to teach it to the children. Befratas is kenit zayin der lilamdo, cannot be to teach it on the free dikulum. If you're not studying, how are you going to teach it? It has to be to the extent that the words of Torah should be sharp. Shinamtum levanecha, right there. The pasuk says, teach them. Shinamtum means that it should be chadudim. Chadudim sharp, which means you should know it very, very strongly, very easily. So why would the Torah start with why would the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe start with the halacha of teaching versus the laws of studying yourself? The Pashas Kenas Masber Zayin, so one can explain it, Ados is two zwei time. This is two reasons. First of all, everyone starts off by learning Zakot because your father was obligated to teach you. So therefore, it all starts in the sequence of the order, the way it happens. First, you learn Torah from your father. So that's actually the order of the way Torah is transmitted. And the main place where we learn the mitzvah of Torah comes with Shnamtum Levanecha, and therefore, that's why we start with teaching the children, because that's the way it's in the Torah. But that gufa, the Rebbe says, needs to be explained. Why is Taka this specialty? Why is Torah that have this special halacha? As we'll see. Aleph. So the Rebbe says for two reasons we can sort of try to explain why the Torah starts off, why the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe begin with laws of teaching. Aleph. Since there is an obligation, there is a positive mitzvah of the Torah to learn and Torah mitakot, to teach Torah to a minor need yibala mitzvahs, not as it is by all mitzvahs. Vos is minat Torah nit mechuyev. In them other mitzvahs minat Torah you're not obligated to mechanech zayin ketanim, to educate the minors. Kumtois, it turns out at the limud Torah by jeden einem, that the study of Torah by each one was onfangen, onfangtzachon. So when does somebody have to start learning Torah? When does it really start? It starts off uminat Torah when there is no hakot. It starts when you're minor, because your father has an obligation minat Torah to teach you Torah. So that means that when do you start learning Torah? When you're a minor. That's why we're going to say the laws of Talmud Torah begins with the dinim wegen limud haTorah von ha'iden. It starts the laws of limud Torah by a yid. When they start by everybody. When do you start learning? When you're a minor, because that's when your father is obligated to teach you. That's why they start in the order in which it happens, which you start when you're a minor. That would be one explanation why we start with that. Start with the learning as a minor when you have father's obligation to teach you. Number two, base that tzivah of Talmud Torah is nichmo pavim rabbi. There's many times duplicated in the Torah the mitzvah, the command for study of Torah. Side that tzivah l'ilmod, both the tzivah to learn, or side that tzivah l'lam, and also the command to teach it. But the tzivah ikri, where is the main place where the Torah commands it? There was verd gerechet, the one that is counted in minyan hamitzvahs for Rambam is counted as part of the number of the 630 mitzvahs or the 248 positive mitzvahs of the Rambam is vishanamtum levanecha. Is this possible? Vishanamtum levanecha. So the Torah, from where it learned that you're supposed to learn Torah, comes from the pasuk teaching your children. Was this koila with the Rambam zog dort, as this includes shanamtum levanecha, as the Rambam says there, lilmod Torah lelamda, both to study Torah and also to teach us. Since the main source of the obligation for the study of Torah, also the part from studying by yourself, is from Vishanantam Levanecha, comes from the verse that you should teach him to your sons, was made ben Pashtus, which simply means B'nai Hakot, your minor. That's why the laws of Talmud Torah begins with the obligation of the father to learn in Torah mit B'nai Hakot, to teach Torah to his son who is a minor. So this answers why we would start with Talmud Torah, teaching your son, because this is where you start, and this is where the Torah main command, the mitzvah, is from Shnam Levanecha. But that alone needs to be understood. Why did the Torah basic it in such a way Why is the Torah, Talmud Torah, the only mitzvah that a minor is obligated? Why does the Torah teach us about the learning of Torah put it into the verse Shinantam Levanecha? Those gufis over Derish Bir. This itself requires explanation. Why is Taka the mitzvah of Talmud Torah separate from all mitzvahs they're mid? Aleph. First of all, it's different. As limud Torah tashayches min Torah that the study of Torah is connected from the Torah also to a minor. Unochmer, and more than that, Beis aderchiv to learn Torah is nichlal in the mitzvah shnam b'menecha. That the obligation to study Torah, the Torah connects it it's included in the mitzvah of shnam b'menecha. So that alone, why was it set up in such a way? In Ois Beis, the Rebbe is going to try to answer the question by saying, perhaps the study of Torah that we learned today, before Ba'olam Hazeh, before Yemei Mashiach, before La'aseh Lavei, is considered like the Torah of a cotton, because we're like minors relative to the other Torah. Maybe that's why we start with the laws of teaching a cotton. But the Rebbe says then that would be true for other mitzvahs as well. Other mitzvahs as well, we're not doing it in the fullest capacity. Boys, we could say it's a little bit squeezed. As their tam is kidei that the reason that this comes first, the laws of teaching the others, the children, is kidei in the mechiluk, is in order to express, to bring out this difference from limud HaTorah b'olam hazeh, from the way we study Torah in this world, relative to the study in the future to come. Moving on Pashut, it's understood and it's obvious. As when Eden yiyu pnuyim b'Torah v'chachmasa, when Yidden will be free to study Torah and the wisdom of Torah, quoting Lashon Rambam, when you Yisrael chachamim gedolim, and the Yidden will be great sages. Umol haaretz, the world will be full with knowledge. Untirba hadas v'chachmim, these are all quotes from the Rambam. What's going to be lost in love in the future, that there's going to be an increase in knowledge and wisdom and the truth. But zayin the limud v'avonos haTorah b'mayla shaloi berach itzter. So the study and understanding of Torah will be on such a level, infinitely, no comparison to the way we'd study Torah today. B'shen Chazal, using the language of our sages of blessed memory, as the Torah of us will let him to itzter, that the Torah that we study now is hevel. It's considered like vanity, legabe the Torah was mevetlen and also love by Mashiach. Relative to the Torah which we're going to learn in the future to come, by Mashiach, today's Torah is hevel. Is the klolus limud Torah bizman hazeh. So therefore, generally learning Torah nowadays, I feel it from gedolim, even if we're talking about adults, nit merve al limud from hakot, it's still like a study from a minor. Unoich, and another aspect of it, a minor learns for educational purposes. The Torah we study now is sort of an education for what we're going to learn in the future. The study of Torah from a minor is an aspect of education, which prepares him, the minor, to the main obligation when he's going to turn into an adult. So likewise, it's also about the general study of Torah in this world. As there is learning that studying now is a chinuch v'hachona to limud HaTorah. It's an education, it's a preparation to the Torah of the future to come. Specifically after, when there is, quoting his Talmud is in his hand, that we study Torah today, the limud HaTorah has the study of Torah in this world, but when kenenem, and then we'll be able to receive them limud HaTorah b'shlemus from Mashiach, the Torah's complete study of the Torah as it would be from Mashiach. So maybe these are the two aspects that it starts with. First of all, these were still like minors, and second of all, it's only like an education for the future. But there be is that must be this explanation is not sufficient. But similar to the above, we also find by other mitzvahs that they're not really fully compared. It's not fully capacity. It's only like a minor, the other mitzvahs that we're doing. And it's only sort of a preparation to the real mitzvahs we will do when Mashiach will come. The also love it. There stayed the Rev the Loshen as the language that is used about this, as the mitzvahs of Mirzayin Mekayim Ba'olam Hazeh, that the mitzvahs that we observe in this world, Zayin and Siyunim, they are sort of signs to the mitzvahs of Mekayim Zayin Los Lovay, to those mitzvahs that we will fulfill in the future to come. Then their observance will be like the Eibishter wants us to do, fully betachlis hashlemis. This means that means that also the kiyum mitzvah, not just Torah, but also when we talk about the observance of mitzvah in this world, is not b'chinas katnas tziyunim. These are only minor. These are only points. They are signs. These are markers. Relative legabe, relative mitzvah love to the mitzvahs of the future to come. When ados is high time a gufa, achinuch va'achona to shleimus kem mitzvahs. For that reason alone, that's a education and a preparation to the fulfillment of the mitzvahs, because it's only an education. So, therefore, that wouldn't be unique to Torah. But from them was the mitzvahs Talmud Torah davke, but the shaykh is euch zu akot. The fact that the mitzvah Talmud Torah has a connection also to a minor. A minor is mechuyev min Torah, father to teach him. Und noch mehr, euch der tzivuk klol of Talmud Torah, wird nichlal also the general command for studying Torah is included. Wird nichlal non gesagt durch die Shnantul v'necha is included and is instructed through the pasuk teaching your children. Shnantul v'necha is moving. It's understood as in Talmud Torah is da'inyam miyuchad, that in the study of Torah is something unique. As a shaykh davke to the mitzvah Talmud Torah, which is connected specifically to the mitzvah of studying of Torah. Ois Gimel. So the Rebbe will explain now that based on the difference between the requirement for mitzvahs and the requirement for Torah. Mitzvahs are mainly the doing to accomplish in the world, and therefore bittul is required, but it's not essential, because the main thing is you have to do the mitzvah, and the person's state of bittul, while he has to have that, but that's not a main aspect of the observance of mitzvah. Whereas Torah, by Torah, in order to be able to connect to something which is totally beyond the person's level to comprehend Torah, the Ein Sof requires essential bittul. And that the Rebbe will later on say that's why it is associated specifically with the learning of a cotton, which is the level of bittul. Gimel. Bet man dos verstehen behagdin the biur achiluk will understand it by first explaining the difference between Torah mitzvahs between Torah mitzvahs. Mitzvahs was werden getan mit dvorim gashmi. Mitzvahs which are done with physical matters is ikir in yonam to oifton in di dvorim. Its main aspect of the mitzvahs is to accomplish in those items in wealth in the world. Similar to the idea, the language that is used, gavra tut oif in chefza. The gavra, the person, accomplishes in the object. So what is the goal? To mevarer mezachich zayin the dover gashmi, to sort out and to refine the physical matter, and the powers of his animal soul. Mit welchem is mekayim the mitzvah, which you use to perform the mitzvah, you use the powers of nefesh habahamis. And therefore, although that mitzvahs have to be observed with subjugation to Hashem, not because logically dictate, not because logic dictates. That is why you do it, nor valazoy is the rotzon elyon, but rather, this is what the supreme will is, this is what Hashem wants. As we say before every mitzvah, asher kiddishanu b'mitzvah vitzimon, He sanctified us with the mitzvahs, and he instructed us, commanded us, which means we're not doing it because we understand it. It's a command. Von deswegen yet is that Iker Zachin Kima mitzvahs, the main aspect in observing mitzvahs, the asiya. The mainly is doing. Der bittel. That is the subject. The other aspect of it, which means that the person should be subjugated. Ubechlolus, Koloshin, Chazal, and in generally, as our sage of blessed memory used the term, those was mitzvahs eine mitzareves abriyas, that the mitzvahs they refine and they accomplish that the briyas, that the creation should become on a higher level. That aspect of it was the mitzvah of Arisruf and Gabra, which the mitzvahs should really bring out in the person who's doing the mitzvahs in mention, is the b'diavad. That does not hold back the mitzvah after the fact. So if you did a mitzvah and it didn't refine you, and it didn't accomplish your level of bittul, didn't do it with simonu, it does not hold back. The mitzvah is still a mitzvah. As is that is like an added aspect, an added matter to the observance of the mitzvah. Do the mitzvah, and it has to be done to be mitzaref. It has to be done with bittul, but it's not the essence, not the mitzvah itself. But on the other hand, by Torah, that level of bittul is part and parcel of Limud HaTorah. Limud HaTorah is in Yonei. The story of Torah is a matter is as der Mensch soll mit sein Seichel verstehen vereinigen sich mit dem Muskel, that the person should with his intellect understand, and he should become one. He should unite with the idea, which means nicht wollen ausführen, was will sich not to want to conclude as you want it, nor suchen der emes von der haskalah, but rather you're searching for the truth of the idea. Not the idea should fit what you want, but you're looking what the idea tells you. And to subjugate your want, what you would like it to be, no, you subjugate that. When we talk about Torah, what are we trying to grasp over here? Not just an idea. We're trying to is just masik zayin chochmos baruch. This is to grasp his blessed wisdom. And therefore is that inyan habitlan inyan ikri. That's why the matter of subjugation is something very main. Befrat in limud Torah, especially when we're talking about study Torah. About basically, even in any idea, but especially in the study of Torah, v'bal chochmos yisborach. Since his blessed wisdom is in ganzen hecher from Geder and Ibrahim, is entire above higher than the definitions, the boundaries of the created being. Kendos niklet ven ban anivra. It cannot be absorbed. You can't capture it, a created being. Nor when learned only when he studies Torah mit bittul, Torah with subjugation. When learned nor mit koyach haseichel, if you just studying with the power of the intellect, kenes im derfirun zu sein, then it can lead him to become, quote, amegala ponim b'Torah shaloi kalocha. Somebody to show a face of Torah which doesn't fit. It's not according to the halacha, it's to the law. He actually has wisdom, he's smart. He says good ideas, comes up. That's not the law of Torah. It's not Torah. It's not his blessed wisdom. The Fathers of Chazal, that's why our sages of blessed memory say, you have to first make the bracha in Torah. As an introduction and as a basis to the story of Torah, so first you have to have the blessing of the Torah. Why? What does the blessing of the Torah tell us? The blessing of the Torah emphasizes Vusis Mudgesh that Inyan there is emphasized this aspect from Vinosan Lonu Es Torah Soy that he gave us his Torah. That's the bracha. The bracha says, I know it's not just a wisdom. It's given, Hashem given us the Torah. And this brings out by the one who's studying the bittul zum neis na Torah, the subjugation to the one who gave the Torah. Through this, he becomes a fitting vessel to the Torah of Hashem. So this is the introduction, just the acceptance, the general idea, the approach is that it's Torah Hashem to subjugate yourself. And then the Rebbe continues, the same thing is at when you actually learn Torah, we see the difference also. The requirement for bittul at the time of study is greater than the requirement of bittul when doing a mitzvah. Dal. Kishem v'simu zayin d'tnua from bittul als yisoid v'hakdama to limud Torah. Just that there has to be that movement of bittul, of subjugation, which serves as a basis and as an introduction to Torah. That's the way you become a vehicle, a vessel to the teaching of Hashem. Likewise, we also need to have that caution from bittul that you must be subjugated when the one who studies Torah at the time that you're actually studying, man, that it should be even more by kiyum mitzvahs. It's more by Torah than required by mitzvahs. By kiyum mitzvahs, when we talk about the observance of mitzvahs, then the mentions a mekayim ki deboyi, when a person fulfills them properly, as need be. Because that is what Hashem told us. So he starts off, that's the mitzvah, I'm doing it, Hashem told us to do so. Is in Zayton the mitzvah, nitaragim is the negin mitzvah. So when he's doing the mitzvah, it does not get mixed in his own self, his own mitzvahs. To begin with, he's in that, he's in a mode to listen to Hashem's instruction. Is the and therefore it is not so essential to Bavornen as a smooth sign the avodah from bittul that we must caution that he must be the service of subjugation. By Torah, but when we talk about Torah, we bound in Yonah. Is the yichud from seichel hod and mit muskel chachmas is barich. Since Torah, what is it? It's the union, the fusion from the intellect of the person with the idea, with the muscle, which is Hashem's blessed wisdom, does haste, which means, as when there is mekabel amitosa shel Torah, that when you are fitting to you intend for the truth of Torah, not just the wisdom, but you're directing it to the truth of Torah. He says, then it's in a way as I swore of us at heart of it. So then that the idea that the person has with effort come up with mitzayin seichel with his intellect, this so to speak, is Hashem's wisdom. So that's what is being accomplished when he's studying Torah. So then you need a caution as in them only then you must caution that it shouldn't get mixed in personal interests and bribery from your own intellect and your own self, basically to really stay focused, that not to get any outside interests, any outside briberies, that you want to tilt the idea, what you're looking is for the truth, for the seichel and the chokhmah of Hashem. that Loimed HaTorah can amol atosam in meinem. The one who studies Torah can sometimes mistakenly think, as it is shown in the Darge, that he's at a level as im is negeya nor der inyan from mitosel Torah, that he is only important to him. What is touches him is only the truth of Torah. Underfar, and therefore, if a person thinks that way, when somebody would say different than his intellect concludes, Nemter is on, so then you take this as the other person is saying against Torah, because in your mind, you think that you are the one that knows the truth of Torah. Aderech Loshen Razal, as similar to the language of our sage of blessed memory, it's the Torah that gets him fired up, burning. In other words, the feeling of anger, of burning, is not his. He says it's the Torah, because his Torah that he understands is what pushes him, because he thinks that this is what his idea is Torah. Be'ez as in the Emerson, but in truth he is mistaken. He is not yet at that level. The truth is the Val Dargosein as im art. I mean, but the truth is that his level is that he bothers him. Also, in addition, maybe not only, but those that he's bothered by somebody saying which is different than his intellect things. It's not the Torah that is bothering him. That is, he thinks that it is. So therefore, in the river, that's why the study of Torah itself needs to be penetrated. It needs to be totally taken in the way of subjugation. Sufarhiten, in order to protect, as the Eigenim it sees v'yeshes, that his own self, his own senses of feeling that him, that shouldn't get him mixed in, and that should bribe, and that would tilt his effort and his hard effort in the intellect, in them in how to understand and how to reveal Hashem's wisdom. Make sure that it doesn't get mixed in your own self in that, and that you will stay true to the idea, to the wisdom of Hashem, to the Torah wisdom of Hashem's blessed wisdom. So these two things that the Rebbe discussed over here. First of all, how the approach has to be in a way of bittul, and when you're learning, you have to have that bittul, especially by Talmud Torah. So the Rebbe says this is also fits with the two special idea when we talk about studying Torah with a child, which the beginning of the laws of Talmud Torah begins both with the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam's halachas. Hey, Yeshloimar, Ados is Oich der Bio. You can say this is also the explanation in the Tzvei in Yonim Hanal Sif Aleph, in the two aspects above in Sif Aleph. Aleph, number one, was that Inyan Fulim that Torah is do umin HaTorah Oich Bakot. First of all, the Rebbe brought out over there that the study of Torah is there by a Torah, also by a minor. The Rebbe pointed out that in that aspect, Torah is different. Torah is different than mitzvahs. That Torah has a connection to a cotton, and base for the tzivui of limud Torah for nagodl. And the other issue the Rebbe brought up, that the command of study of Torah from an adult is nichlal in tzivui v'shnam v'necha, is included in the command where the Torah talks about specifically teach your children. That's the main source for study of Torah in general. Weil in Zay sagen sich heraus, because in this you have it expresses itself. The Tzvei and Yonei Bittel. These two aspects of subjugation was further sich by mitzvahs Talmud Torah, which are required by the mitzvah of study of Torah. Das was limud ha-Torah hauptzuchon wenn mir is noch hakotten, that the fact that we start limud ha-Torah, study of Torah starts when you're a minor. And similar to this, and minimally with Rabbanon, if not from Torah, I feel noch far dem gil from katnas. It even starts before you're even a minor. There, you already have a connection. When you're a minor, okay, you may not be fully developed your intellect, but you still have some understanding. But with Rabbanon, at least, you're also related before you even understand anything. It says the father teaches him, so there is a connection to Torah by a katan even before that. So that idea is madgish, that emphasizes as the haschola v'yisoid from limud Torah, that the beginning and the foundation of the study of Torah is not their seichel shebetorah. It's not the wisdom of Torah, nor their mamit umaktin atzmai, but rather the diminishing and making yourself small. The subjugation to the one who gave the Torah, which is beyond reason, beyond knowledge, beyond rationale. Was that inyan habitl is nit obheinig from gadol v'seichel. That aspect of self-negation, subjugation, isn't hinged on how great your seichel is or maturity of intellect. Not that is farad by yedin, that exists by everyone. I feel by a tinuk, even by a child ledaber, when he knows to speak mitzad nishmosei, because of his soul, he also has already that subjugation. So that's the first part. And the zweite part, and the second detail. So that's the part that Torah learning is actually something which everybody has a connection. And the second aspect, of limud Torah for Agodl, the fact that also the command of the study of Torah by an adult, that is included in the command you should teach it to your sons, Lerun, that teaches us, as them limud gufa, that also at the time when you're studying, when you are invested in the study with the power of your intellect, with the limud for agodl, when you're studying as an adult, as a mature person, with understanding and grasping, there needs to be the subjugation like a mind. So now the Rebbe is going to continue to connect this also to the idea of what we learn in Pirkei Avos on that particular Shabbos when the sicha was said. The Rebbe is going to find an association with that. So here the Rebbe basically explained that the two ideas that we have, especially in Torah, that's found by a cotton that explains these two aspects. Now the Rebbe is going to go over to explaining two halachas in the, or two mishnas in the Pirkei Avos. Vav, v'geretche merer amol, as spoken many times, as about yeder inyan. Since every aspect, befrat in Torah, especially when it involves Torah, is b'ashgacha pratis, is by divine providence, ubediyuk, and is precise. It's verstandig, it's understood as it says, that there is a content, an idea, connection, sufficient there, parshas hashavua, between the portion of the week, and the perik in Avos was mizoktum 11th, and the chapter in Avos, which we say and study in the Matrafet and Shabbos on that particular Shabbos. for the Shabbos is Tzvision Pesach and Shavuos, both Pirkei Avos as it's learned between the weeks between Pesach and Shavuos. And similar to those Pesach and Shavuos would also be in all summer Shabbosim, in which, like the minig, according to the custom, as the Alter Rebbe brings down in the Siddur, so Zogun Pirkei Avos called Shabbos HaKayis to say the chapters of Avos during the summer months, so all the Shabbosim of the summer. So basically, we have to find a connection between the Parsha and the Pirkei Avos. Ubinyanenu, as far as our matter, we bald as Zainen Do, they are Beposkim. Since there are various opinions in the codifier, Tzimen Zokt Pirkei Avos dem Shabbos Tisha B'Av. When Shabbos comes out on Tisha B'Av, whether you say Pirkei Avos, ve'elu divrim v'kim chayim, and they're both words of a living God, so they're both authentic. Batman v'vayir zayin do loit ein deya. So the Rebbe said, we'll explain here according to the deya. The deya is mazok ye Pirkei Avos, that you do say Pirkei Avos. As you see, the sicha was said. The part of it in Shabbos Parsha of Voeschanan Tovshin Lamed Zayin, and apparently that year Tisha B'Av was on Shabbos. That's what it looks like, and the Rebbe explained connection with Pirkei Avos. Imchal out of Tisha B'Av b'Shabbos. So therefore, okay. So that depends on the Shabbos was Tisha B'Av, and it was a mitzvah when we learned. So this is the perek, I guess. So basically it means that's why they were up to. That's why they're up to this perek. Tisha B'Av is Chalbish Lemdim Parsha Voeschanan Perek Shlishi. So, according to the other day, it would be Perek Sheni if you didn't say Pirkei Avos. So Parsha Voeschanan would only be Perek Sheni because they would not have said Pirkei Avos then. So that's what the Rebbe brings this down. It's explained that it's basically the connection to the Perek Shlishi to the Parsha Voeschanan. Since I anticipate for him with a great yearning for Mashiach, every day Mashiach will come, and these days will turn into holidays. Is biz bismichas mamish to Shabbos Tisha B'Av. So till we actually come close to Tisha B'Av, is do koilel. So then you look forward with a great yearning, as l'chol hadayis vetmen zogen damost Pirkei Avos. Then, according to all opinions, you will say then Pirkei Avos, because it's not going to be any more Tisha B'Av. So it says noisef of the klolus the kishayches. It was actually Perek Revi, not Perek Shlishi. Noisef of their klolus the kishayches which in Parshas Voeschanan Perek Revi von Avos, in addition to the general connection between the portion of Voeschanan and the fourth chapter of Pirkei Avos, was Mizokta Pianal Oichdem Yor in Shabbos Parshas Voeschanan, which we say, based on the above, it comes out that also this year in Shabbos Parshas Voeschanan we say Perek Revi, because we said Pirkei Avos on the Shabbos, Tisha B'Av, we said Pirkei Avos. But since they beitig findet man ribu in Yonim wegen Talmud Torah. In both in Parshas Voeschanan and in Perek Revi, we find many matters which are connected to the study of Torah. Atzol from the Tzivuim of Talmud Torah, a number of commands on the study of Torah, staying in Parshas Voeschanan, are written in the portion of Voeschanan. And also many Mishnayos in the Perek and Halten Torah, they contain instruction b'shayches to limud Torah as it relates to the story of Torah. You find man euch in zwei Mishnayos in the Perek. So we find in two Mishnahs in this chapter a lesson, an instruction, and a special emphasis now as far as these two aspects of the subjugation that we discussed earlier before the study of Torah and during the study of Torah was by Talmud Torah, which are necessary when we study Torah. Zion. First we'll start Mishnah Chav. Mishnah Chav says, one who learns the Torah in his young age, he can be compared to the Diyok Suva and the Yar Chodesh, to ink which is written on a new paper. One who learns Torah in his old age, what could he be compared to the Diyok Suva and the Yar Mochuk, to ink that is written on an erased piece of paper in which the ink doesn't sit so well as it does on a clean new paper. Because l'chayre is done in glatik. Similarly, since something is not so smooth in this Mishnah, why does the Mishnah have to tell us something derogatory about a zokin? Mele, to tell you the greatness of learning at a young age, encourage you, understand. But what happens if you didn't learn, so your old age, so that's trying to tell you that that's no good. It's verstandig. It's understood the lesson from ersten Fall, from the first case. If one learns Torah as a minor, as a child, was his mizaris, that hastens, that encourages a yid wegen der Wichtigkeit zu lernen Torah, about the importance of studying Torah in der Kindheit and Jugend, when you are young age and a child and a youth. Und nicht zu ablegen, those bizer wird azoken, and not to delay it until you become older. But was darf aber the Mishnah madgish sein? Well, why does the Mishnah need to emphasize the Warnung from zweiten Fall, the caution that it tells you from the second case? If you learn Torah and you're older, what you could be compared to writing on an old piece of paper? In them, the Mishnah is then the Mishnah trying to tell us as there was hot nid gelernt Torah, that someone who had not studied Torah, and for whatever reason, the person did not study. Until he became older, so he should give up, God forbid, from being successful in the study of Torah. The explanation of this. Api Anal is the Pirush in Haloimet Torah Yeled. Based on the above, we're saying if you learn Torah as a child, we're not talking about in age, we're talking about your approach. You're learning it with the innocence of a child. The innocence, the subjugation of a child. In addition to the simple meaning, it means as a learn Torah mit bittel, that he learns Torah with subjugation. That is maktin u'mevatel ve'ayeled. He makes himself small and he subjugates himself as a child. But Daf give them that way, specifically, that way, the Torah is absorbed by him. To the way as ink is written on new paper. But if a person studies Torah just by using his intellect and his idea, he learns Torah as a zokin. Zokin means one who is already a chochem. He has acquired chokhmah. On bittel is like a bittel. Can Torah Hashem, but then the Torah cannot be absorbed properly. That's the Mishnah, hidden intent of that Mishnah. Mishnah Chof. Mishnah Yutes Ches. Over there, Shmuel HaKotten says, when your enemy falls, don't rejoice. When he stumbled, let your heart not be happy, because Hashem might see this and Hashem might not like it. And he will take turn his anger from him. Is Bavuz the Shaila, so there's a very known question over here. What is the novelty that Shmuel HaKotten says? Is a pasuk in Mishlei. That's a verse in Mishlei. So why is he repeating a verse of Mishlei saying in the name of Shmuel HaKotten? It's Masbid, the Machzer Vitri. The Machzer Vitri explains at the pasuk the pasuk talks about war in the world, occupation of the world, worldly matter. That war, don't be happy when your enemy in this world fails. But here we're talking about a Torah, so to speak, enemy, somebody who you're battling in ideas over trying to figure out in Torah. When Shmuel HaKotten is Mechadish, and Shmuel HaKotten comes up with the novelty as Torah, that also when we're talking about a war of Torah, a debate in Torah, amongst two sages, two Talmidei Chachamim, who are competing and going at each other in a halacha matter. And one was victorious over the other one. So the one who was victorious needs to know that in the fall of your enemy, of the other Talmid Chacham, don't rejoice. Do not rejoice with the victory over the other one. Similar to the prayer of Rabbi Chaim Wolosow, he prayed when he went to the base medrash. He says, part of the prayer he asked they shouldn't rejoice when he loses out, and also my friends should not stumble in halacha, and I should rejoice in them. He prayed that shouldn't happen. Why would one think that you're allowed to rejoice in the case when there is a battle of ideas in Torah? Why is the war that we wage in Torah ideas? Over here you might have thought as simchas that there could be rejoicing when your enemy falls. And that's why Shmuel HaKotten needs to caution against this. Now the idea is the Baal Erot Menatzeach given since he was victory over someone else in a halachic matter, is as doch nit sein Nitzachon, that it's not his personal victory. Not a Nitzachon for Torah, that becomes a victory for Torah. Since Nizbar geworden an Inyan in Torah, something in Torah has been now sorted out. This should bring him to a great rejoicing that the Torah now has been figured out in the right part of Torah. Zokta b'Shmuel HaKotten, however, Shmuel HaKotten says, no, that bin foilei vicha al tismach, that do not rejoice in the fall of your competitor, your other, calls him the enemy. If what was important to you is just the truth of Torah, then in your rejoicing, you're not really rejoicing just because of Hashem, because then you wouldn't sense in your simcha, you wouldn't feel that it's your enemy falling over there. If all your interest is with the Torah, then the Torah won, the right part of Torah came out, so why do you feel that your enemy fell and that you beat somebody else? Then you would only feel the positive. That a matter of Torah has become sorted out. Now we know what the halach is. So that means, that's what Shmuel HaKotten has to say. If you still feel bin foile that it's a vecho, then al tismach, noch harinyan. An additional aspect. Then wohl gehalten bei der Emeser zugetrogenkeit zu Megale sein, if you would be holding by the true devotion and interest of revealing Chachmosi Yisbarach, to reveal Hashem's wisdom, blessed wisdom, wollt bei ihm bechlal nicht gewähnt zu kein Hechrich, to onem, and then it wouldn't be so sure that you should consider it as a fall from the Levecha. You wouldn't even think that somebody else felt, that your enemy felt, that the other one you're debating felt. Because both words are words of a living God. So that means that the other person is also part of the words of Elikim Chayim. And now, the halacha lemaise can it be the days. The practical law can't be two opinions, because while in Poil, in actuality, you can only do like one opinion. But both of these opinions have are authentic, are true, because of their words of the living God. So, notwithstanding, you shouldn't even feel that you are somehow was victorious over somebody else, because the other one is as authentic as you are. The only thing is, in the Maisa B'Poil, we have to do one way. Even after the law ruling of the law, the second opinion still remains Torah. Is over der day in it shaykh zu sagen, so therefore you can't really say bin foil that it fell, it didn't really fall, not also your enemy, because it is actually sustained, not in Lemaisa level, but on the level of Divrei Elikim Chayim. It's still words of Hashem. As in Zayin Simcha Verder Her, since in his rejoicing, what do you sense? As he is bin foil, you do feel that sort of your enemy fell. Is a siman, that is proof. As in them is a reingemish hergesh, that here you have mixed in a feeling for the danotzach. I was victorious. That he won over, he beat the other person. Therefore, Zogt Shmuel Hakotten. Shmuel, who was called Hakotten, the minor, because he was a person who, of humility, was he is called so because he used to make himself small. As limud Torah mudzayin mitan bittel, that the study of Torah has to be with subjugation. As zoy, to such an extent, has been al tismach, that when your enemy falls, don't rejoice. Im is not negeya to the gain. So emes from Torah. What is important to him is just the Torah truth. But after all, so we're telling you that don't be rejoicing because of it's all Divrei Elikim Chayim, but one can still argue. In Maisa B'Poil, in action, he did win, because the halacha is like that. So the Torah won. So who says that this is really a personal, it's the Torah's victory? The whole explanation we gave is because he's also authentic, because Elu Ve'elu Divrei Elikim Chayim. But the truth of the matter is, as far as halacha, the other one did win. So how could we say that he's equal, that it's not the foil? It is the foil, because in Meissen foil. Test. As Kendoch over sein Detainer, however, the argument can still be MS Take, let it be true as euch die Idee von Eivecha, that also the opinion of the Eivecha can sein is gehalten mit Tzad Divrei Elikim Chayim, from the perspective of the Elikim Chayim, that also is authentic, and is the Faran in the Torah, and that's why it's a part of Torah. But the other one wished to express his opinion in Absak L'Halacha L'Maisa. He wanted to do a ruling that in actuality, practically in practice, that we should do according to that opinion. And in them, Machter And in that he's making a mistake. It's actually, it's very clearly not so as the other one said. So it is a case in which a vecha fell. He fell because he failed in Maisa Bepoil. The law is not like the other person, like the other Talmud Chacham. Why do we demand? That he should cause by himself, that he should stand on the, in a way that he shouldn't rejoice. And even more, we're saying, as though he shouldn't consider it. He shouldn't feel it as your enemy falling, that your competitor, you nullified, you negated something which was not true. That should make you rejoicing, to be able to, that you came up and you made sure that the halacha in practical will be the right way. So why did we say that you should not rejoice in that? So there Shmuel HaKotten continues. Hashem might see, and that's going to be bad in his eyes, and then he will remove his anger from him. As Ken Zayin, it's possible. This, that his buddy, his friend, did not direct it to halacha, that is was not halachically sound. It's not because he's lacking in his intellect or similar, nor als an einish, maybe because of a punishment. Mitzad apishal mailo, because of the anger of above, is that he's not, doesn't have the merit to direct to halacha that he should come up with the right law. You're not allowed to be rejoicing when your enemy falls. Why? Because it comes out that through you was accomplished an einish von Eibishter Vienna. I mean, the other one's punishment came to him through you. The simcha darf sein nor von dem was in his body geworden, the halacha lamitosa. The simcha needs to be only that there is a true halacha, and not that you caused and you brought about the other one's failure because of something which has ape Hashem. V'adrabe, on the contrary, oy ba'im v'tzayin simcha bin foyle vecha. If you have joy and you rejoice in the fact that the other one's failure, the other one's fell, mistakes is recht as possible, as der mitvet der goyim sein, that you will cause the heishim olav ape, then that Hashem will take back from the other person his anger. That Eibishter vet kaviyachol upkern ape from sein chaver of him, so to speak. Hashem will remove the anger of his friend and put it on him. Them reintrachten sich in them. When you will reflect on this, that they're poilen by zich, then you will impact by yourself. You will influence yourself. As nit norvet by im nit sein simcha bin for. Not only won't you rejoice that your enemy is falling, nor adrab, the contrary. You will be sustained the opposite. As einam zozim mishom, you will not move from them until they become friends that love each other. As our sages of best memory tell us by Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, which were always disagreeing, that they would conduct one with another with dearness and with friendship, even though they were halachically and learning, they were opponents, but they would especially be with dearness and friendship one or another, to fulfill the verse that says that the truth and the peace is what they love, and that brought them together. This is Mesichas Erlich of Dalet Tevis Tovshin Lamed Ches and Shabbos Parshas Voeschanan Tovshin Lamed Zayin.